Good afternoon. It's Monday, the 9th of May, 2016, just after 1 o'clock. Welcome to UK Column News. I'm your host, Brian Gerrish. With me in the studio, Mike Robinson. Well, the weather. The weather is variable. It seems London's got the best of the sunshine together with Norfolk. It's warm and a bit on the hazy, cloudy side in Wales. Plymouth is pretty cool at the moment, and we've already had some rain today. Glasgow doing well, sunshine also. So there we are. Brace yourselves if you're of a weak disposition.
Happy Europe Day, Brian.
Thank you. I've been looking forward to it for some time.
Yes, it's great. In case you don't know what this is, because I hadn't a clue, Europe Day is apparently an annual celebration of peace and unity in Europe. But of course, like the Queen, there are 2 Europe Days. So there's one Europe Day, which is the 5th of May, which is for the Council of Europe, and the 9th of May, which is today, obviously, which is for the European Union. And this is also known as the EU's Flag Day. And this apparently today has greater visibility. We'll come on to this. I'll explain why we're doing this in a little moment. But in the meantime, to celebrate this, David Cameron gave a speech. And he said, in 45 days' time, the British people will go to the polling stations across our islands and cast their ballots in the way we have done in this country for generations. They will, as usual, weigh up the arguments, reflect on them quietly, discuss them with friends and family, and then calmly and without fuss take their decision. But this time their decision will not be for a parliament, nor even 2. They will decide the destiny of our country not for 5 years or for 10, but in all probability for decades, perhaps a lifetime. So there you go. He went on to say that Britain has a fundamental national interest in maintaining common purpose in Europe to avoid future conflict between European countries. And I thought that particular little quote, that little soundbite there was interesting, because he didn't say maintaining a common purpose. He said maintaining common purpose in Europe. Is he talking about the organisation?
Well, he's talking about the political agenda of the political charity Common Purpose. It's now coming out into the open, Mike, and it's so easy to see this, that the Common Purpose is the creation of the European superstate, which is a dictatorship in its own right.
He went on to say the international situation confronting Britain today means that closest possible cooperation with the European neighbours isn't an optional extra. We see a newly belligerent Russia, the rise of the Daesh network to our east and to our south. The migration crisis, dealing with these requires unity of purpose in the West, so that's nearly a common purpose. And he said that is why NATO and top military opinion, British, American, European, is clear that the common purpose of the EU does not undermine NATO. It's a vital reinforcement to it. So basically 3 times in this speech he's talking about common purpose or unity of purpose. This is something which is right at his heart. Well, he made this speech, of course, and the Telegraph had it all live. And who do we see holding hands and skipping along with David Cameron? Well, they're not quite holding hands, but we certainly see who it is. It's no one. It's another David. It's David Miliband skipping along with Cameron. Just very similar. Isn't it interesting that the right and the left are hand in hand in Europe, just like Cameron's mentor, Ken Clarke, when he took Tony Blair off to Bilderberg all those years ago. And let's not forget what the Telegraph reported a couple of weeks ago, that David Miliband, Cameron's new friend, apparently is also a friend of Hillary Clinton, and he's expecting to be given a US government job when Hillary becomes president. And of course, in order to do this, he's going to have to give up his British citizenship and become a US citizen. But he said that he really loves Hillary. He thinks she's got a wonderful smile. He was struck up his friendship with her when he was Foreign Secretary, of course. And he gave an interview to ES Magazine last month, apparently, when he was gushing about her. And he said, she's a very good listener. She's not afraid of what she doesn't know, and she wants to learn what she doesn't know, which is an underestimated quality in politics. Wasn't Donald Rumsfeld was going on about things he didn't know in the past? That just their position on the political spectrum just doesn't seem to make sense. But anyway, as I said to Louise last night, he's reported as saying, when she smiles, he's talking about Hillary then, When she smiles a full smile, she's got a fantastic smile. You know when someone relaxes and you suddenly capture what they're really like. She doesn't take herself too seriously, is his opinion.
So he's in love with her.
Absolutely
basically.
in love with her.
He's in love with the older woman.
Now, of course, yes.
Within the magic circle.
Indeed. Now, of course, David Miliband, currently in charge of international rescue. We have an article on this published not so long ago, earlier this year. The International Rescue Committee, a Trojan horse of the globalists. Please have a look at that. But getting back to the EU referendum, something which seems to have broken into the mainstream, Brian, is this whole issue of an EU army. And here we've Joseph Daul today talking about the EU army. He is a member of the European Parliament. He's leader of the sort of biggest grouping within the European Parliament. And he's saying that today, more than ever, the peace of our continent cannot be safeguarded without a common and functional security union, including a European army. He said EU countries must come together and commit to further cooperation, information exchange and counter-radicalisation efforts. This is the only way to defend our core values and defend the lives of EU citizens. The EU should protect its citizens, apparently. We must secure more social Europe and make sure no one is left behind. A single country cannot tackle our current challenges, such as the migration crisis and the fight against terrorism, on its own. Only by working together can we find successful solutions and keep working for the future of next generations, is what he was bumbling on about.
So they are building a European military now rapidly. And of course, we've just had the scrapping of the last of the British aircraft carriers, Illustrious. So we've got new aircraft carriers coming. Unfortunately, they don't have enough aircraft. Well, they don't have any aircraft because the aircraft don't work. Massive cuts across the British military. We now know that this has been done deliberately to allow British military to be gently positioned inside the EU military structure. And we have been warning, picked up by the mainstream press, that the European military command and control system is now already in position in UK, and senior retired military people have said this can now be activated within 24 hours. Within 24 hours, we can now have the EU military in control within Britain. This is unbelievably serious. And of course, these people knew it was coming, just working at it piecemeal, step by step. Well, what does that take us? We're in a democracy, of course, and the local election results are very important. We have Kevin Edwards with us from South Wales, who's going to give us some comment on the election results and what's really happened in Wales. Let's see whether Kevin is there, and then we'll have a look at those results. Kevin, have we got you?
You've got me, Brian. How are you doing? Hi, Mike.
Yes, thank you very much for joining us. What I'll do is I'll just put up a few of these results on screen. We're really only doing it for the humour factor because most of the reports were just, I'm not even sure what the word is. Let's have a look at this. These are from the Telegraph. I should have notified that, but they're part of the statistics put up by the Telegraph. So here we've got the overall local elections. Of course, everybody claimed that they won, which is good, isn't it, really? A lot of very good diagrams, very colourful, which help us to understand what's going on. So here we've got a bit of a breakdown of things in Scotland. Now, I'll just introduce this. Mike's talked about this a lot over the past couple of weeks, but it's broken in Scotland now, Mike. You might not have been aware of that, but questions being asked about were the elections north of the border fair, because of course we've got a Tory company and Peter Lilly in particular helping to manage the count, and surprisingly the Conservatives made gains north of the border. Just an accident, though.
Yes.
Okay, well, here's a little bit more. So we've got colours and bar charts. Here's Wales. Don't worry, Kevin, we're coming to you. So here's the Welsh Assembly results after 60 of 60 seats. And I didn't want you to be left out, Mike, so I also brought in Northern Ireland there.
It's not worth discussing.
Okay. So what's your views, Kevin? What have the elections done for South Wales?
much of a change. We've still got the Labour Party on 29 seats. Plaid Cymru have jumped up to the main opposition party on 12, with the Conservatives having come down to 11. The Liberal Democrats took a bit of a battering. They lost 4 out of their 5 seats, so they're sitting here with 1. But the big change in Wales, which is quite remarkable, is UKIP took 12.5% of the vote. And for the first time, we now have 7 UKIP Welsh Assembly members, which is going to be very, very interesting for the next 5 years.
And Kevin, I understand that success by UKIP did slightly more than ruffle a few feathers.
Yeah, the political establishment, or the established political parties, same thing, I suppose. There's a lot of gnashing of teeth and wailing going on about UKIP having a presence in the Welsh Assembly government for obvious reasons, the usual reasons that they spread out. But I think it's a very interesting thing. We have to judge these people on what they do in the next 5 years, Brian, not what they've never had a chance to do, or what other political parties, allege what their agenda is. So I think they will definitely stir things up in the Welsh Assembly government. They have said that they will not go into coalition or form alliance with any political party. They will be there purely to monitor everything that's going on in the Welsh Assembly government, and where necessary, bring the government to account. So on the surface of it, that's very interesting, and hopefully it'll work out well.
Kevin, if we ask the simple question, why did people vote for those UKIP candidates?
Well, in my opinion, whether we like it or not, it's all coming down to the EU referendum, Brian. The opinion polls in Wales on the in-out seem to be swinging, but I think the last one that I saw showed that more people, by about 3 or 4%, are wanting out of the European desperately than those that want to stay in. And of course, all the established political parties in Wales, as in probably everywhere else, are pro-European. So take away agendas and manifestos, etc. If you can see through the sham, which is the European Union, there is only one place that you can actually put your cross, and that was for UKIP.
Right. But Plaid Cymru also picked up votes, and I think that her name's just gone out of my head. The lady who had given you support over the Linda Lewis case did particularly well.
She did very well indeed. Congratulations to Plaid Cymru. They increased their vote by 1.2.
Bethan is the lady.
Bethan Jenkins,
yes.
That's it. And increased their seats by 1. Bethan Jenkins, I'm delighted to say, who's an exceptional politician and an exceptional human being as well. She held on to her seat very comfortably in the regional list here in South Wales. And she did increase her vote by, I believe it was 9%, where she took on the incumbent Labour member in Aberafon, David Rees, who, if you remember, Brian, we've already had history with, who actually got a letter from David Michael from Neath Talbot Council stating that he'd never, ever had any legal documentation to extradite Linda's daughter from America. And as soon as he got us that, he went quiet and decided to remain loyal to his party, the Labour Party. So Bethan did come second. She had a 9.3% swing from Labour to Plaid Cymru. And we can't put all the factors into it, but as a group for the Justice for Linda Lewis campaign in Port Talbot, we did consider what to do, whether to stick out a lot of press releases against David Rees, who, in my opinion, is not fit for public office and is actually guilty of misconduct in public office and perverting the course of justice now with what he found out about what his council's doing. We took politics to, how can I say, a community level, where the thousands of supporters in South Wales were talking to the neighbours and family and saying, do you know about the Linda Lewis campaign? No, I've never heard of it. Do you know what David Rees did? No. Explaining on the doorstep, in the streets, in the supermarket, in the bingo halls, that this guy was not a true representative of the people, and that the only person that was worth a vote in Aberafon itself was Bethan Jenkins. So I can't tell you how many votes, obviously, the Linda Lewis campaign have aided and abetted Bethan's excellent performance, but we certainly did have a small part to play in it.
Okay, well, for people who may be new to UK column news, the case that Kevin is talking about there is a child snatch case where a girl was taken literally at gunpoint from a mother in America and has never been returned. Kevin, do you think that the subject of child stealing, obviously Linda's case is taking precedence, but do you think that the child stealing issue, which is now happening across the country, children being taken unlawfully by the British state, is that capable of uniting some of these political parties or people within them? Is it possible we could see good people in Clyde Cymru working with good people in UKIP or indeed any of the other parties?
Well, I certainly hope so, because if we look at the intake of Plaid Cymru, not only was Bethan thankfully successful in going back in, Plaid Cymru actually took another seat in South Wales West, where the second candidate is a chap called Dr. Dai Lloyd. Now he's back into the Welsh Assembly after a 5-year absence. And when I was an elected councillor in South Wales and I first started working with Linda Lewis, we were working with Dai Lloyd. I have to say this, but at the time, I believe, with him being elected, I think he was kind of playing a bit of lip service and wasn't doing his position the justification that Bethan Jenkins has done. So I hope that he will back up Bethan Jenkins and give her much more support than he gave Linda when he was on his own. And there's another Assembly member has returned called Adam Price, who used to be the MP for Carmarthen West and Dinever, I think, or Carmarthen East and Dinever. He has been involved historically many, many years ago with the Linda Lewis case. So hopefully he'll throw his weight behind it. And yes, I do hope that people can put their political differences aside in the Welsh Assembly government, because out of the 7 UKIP new intake, one person I know myself historically, and Linda and myself in the general election in 2010, had a very long chat about this person who said, look, you know, I'm not going to win, but if I ever get into a position of political power, please make contact with me. What I've heard from you two is absolutely disgusting, what Neath Talbot Council has done. And another reason to be optimistic as far as the Justice for Linda Lewis campaign goes is was on the phone yesterday to Robert Green, and Robert apparently in last year's election was working closely with a friend of his who was in UKIP in North Wales, and he got to know somebody very well from UKIP in that area. Now this person has also been elected, and Robert was asking, he said, look, we'll let the dust settle. I believe today's the first day there, so, you know, new Assembly members, it's a bit early to sort of, you know, try and get their help, because they probably can't even find the canteen or the toilets at the moment. But Robert did say, would you like me to put, do I have your, you know, your consent to, you know, tell this person all about the Linda Lewis campaign and give her your phone number, and if, you know, once everything's settled in, meet up with her. So yes, absolutely. So currently out of the 60 MPs, every Assembly member will know about Linda Lewis's case. Some of the new ones might not, but we can say that there are 5 people who have been historically and currently linked with getting justice for Linda Lewis. So let's just hope that they can put away the rosettes. That's gone, the election's over with, and work together to get the justice that Linda deserves.
Brilliant. Thank you for telling us that. Well, of course, the subject of corruption follows pretty closely, because we know it takes a corrupt local authority to steal children. But apparently we shouldn't worry, Mike. Is that correct?
That's right, because it turns out that there are actually 2 anti-corruption, in fact 3 anti-corruption conferences going on. Now, I had originally said a few weeks ago that this was the one that David Cameron was backing up, but in fact it's not. This is an independent one. It's a different one. So I apologise to them if they're upset at all that I thought that was the David Cameron one. So David Cameron had this to say today: corruption is an enemy of progress and the root of so many of the world's problems. It destroys jobs and holds back economic growth, traps the poorest in desperate poverty, and undermines our security by pushing people towards extremist groups.
Wow.
So corruption pushes people towards extremist groups. I wonder whether he was looking in the mirror when he...
Well, he clearly knows a lot about this, and I'm not surprised, because
Yes.
we must have one of the most corrupt governments we've ever had.
Well, indeed.
With
So,
due acknowledgement of Tony Blair, of course, who was special in this field.
He was special, yes. So why are we mentioning this? Because actually David Cameron's conference is taking place this week. But even before it starts, the day before, the Commonwealth is holding their own. And it's called Tackling Corruption Together, a conference for civil society, business and government leaders. And who have we got on this? Well, the welcome keynote is going to, well, the welcome is by the Right Honourable Patricia Scotland, QC, Secretary General of the Commonwealth of Nations. The first day's keynote is by the President of Nigeria. And we have all kinds of speakers, Secretary General of the International Trade Union Congress. We've got the Serious Fraud Office speaking. Now, they know all about corruption because, of course, that's the organisation that dropped the investigation into the corruption around the Al Yamama arms deal and Saudi Arabia. That was at the behest of Tony Blair. And we've got Mark Wolf, who is Senior United States District Judge and Chair of the Integrity Initiatives International. It staggers me. There's days of this, or at least there's hours of this, and 20 or 30 40 people speaking, perhaps. We've got all these people around the world working within civil society and within government, all dealing with corruption. You've got to wonder why there is any. But anyway, getting back to the Prime Minister's Corruption Conference, which is on Thursday, he's going to bring together world leaders from countries such as Afghanistan, Colombia, Nigeria, Norway. And he wants all those at the summit to sign up to the first ever global declaration against corruption. And he wants them to commit to working together to tackle corruption. And he wants them to acknowledge that corruption undermines efforts to end poverty, promote prosperity, defeat terrorism and extremism. So that's good, isn't it?
Well, it is. I mean, it's David Cameron, and I instantly get a sense of reassurance the moment I hear him speak.
As you would.
As you would.
Yes. Okay, so...
Sorry,
yes,
can't hold that one.
I know. Right, we've been discussing the issue of unaccompanied child refugees quite a lot recently, and this was begun by Tim Farron, of course, leader of the Liberal Democrat Party, and this is the latest salvo in this debate in The Guardian. Should David Cameron's U-turn on unaccompanied child refugees be celebrated? And this Amelia gentleman here is asking, is saying that councils are willing to help, but we will be reluctant until it is clear who will pay for extra school places and provide foster care required. Now, of course, this is a key point. Cameron has said that he's done a U-turn, but at no point has anybody mentioned how much money is available for these people, for these children to come in. She says the Home for Good charity, that's this organisation, has identified 10,000 families who have come forward to say they would like to foster a refugee child, but local authority officials say not all of the well-intentioned offers of help are suitable. So basically, people have come forward, but they're not good enough. Apparently. And it's not just in this country either, because UNICEF here are really pushing this as well. They're saying that unaccompanied children are falling between the cracks, and they're saying many simply run away from reception centres to join their extended families while they wait, or because they've not had a full hearing to determine their best interests, or have not had their rights explained to them. And she's saying that in Slovenia, for example, more than 80% of unaccompanied children went missing from reception centres, while in Sweden, up to 10 children are reported missing each week. But as we've been pointing out, this is not unique to unaccompanied children in Europe. This is happening in this country as well, to our own children, never mind those coming from outside the UK. And so all those pushing for children who... Nobody is denying they need help. They absolutely need help. But for all those pushing for them to come here, we need some reassurance that when they get here, they're going to be looked after properly. They're going to be properly funded, and they're actually going to be followed through their careers to make sure they don't end up being trafficked themselves and end up being abused in care, which people in the establishment in this country don't seem to care about too much.
No, because I think they are helping to run the abuse rings. Kevin, would you like to just give us a quick comment on that one?
Well, it's like everything else, Brian, that's happening these days, isn't it? It's problem, reaction, solution. It's governments that create the problem, and then they come out as white knights and react and offer a solution to the problems that they created in the first place. We weren't bombing these people's countries for basically to rob them of their wealth. None of this would be happening.
Well, I'd certainly agree with that. Do you trust the British government to look after children?
No, neither would I trust Jimmy Savile to look after any of my cousins. Absolutely not. There is no way on earth that I would. It's a difficult one to call because obviously the human compassion side of what's going on, you know, tugs at your heartstrings. But absolutely no way at all would I trust the government. The Welsh government or national government or certainly the Scottish government after the disgrace of Holly Gregg with anybody's children.
Thank you.
Okay, what's next? NATO. Sorry, Kevin. Here we go. At last, there we go. NATO has released. Although the date is April, it seemed to be distributed today from the Defence and Security Committee. The new defence imperatives. The implementation of Wales pledges and prospects for Warsaw. So this is the report, sort of progress report on what they've done since the NATO Wales conference a couple of years ago, and preparation for the next conference, which is this year in Warsaw. This is the draft general report. And of course, naturally, the first word in this report, can you guess what it is?
Well, common.
Russia. Russia.
Okay, got that right.
Russia's invasion of Ukraine in March 2014 confirmed that what many policymakers already understood. NATO faces significant challenges on two fronts. Along its eastern flank, NATO is dealing with a revisionist and military resurgent Russia, bent on furthering its continental interests. So Russia is bent on furthering its continental interests via escalating brinkmanship that seeks to undermine NATO cohesion through saber-rattling coercion, propaganda, and even exploitation of the Syrian migration crisis.
Can I use my expression dross, Mike? This is utter dross.
It's sheer hypocrisy. It's unbelievable, and so it goes on right the way through. They of course, blow their own trumpet quite a lot, talking about the NATO response force, the very high readiness joint task force, NATO force integrity units, multinational core northeast, and they then go on to discuss the defence spending pledge, which is described as 2 and 20, and this is quite an interesting little description because, of course, 2 and 20 is how hedge funds aim for their fees. So it's a fascinating choice, 2 and 20. The risk of nuclear weapons, they go on to say, use in the Euro-Atlantic region is perhaps at its highest level since the end of the Cold War. But they want to expand the role of nuclear weapons in NATO's deterrence posture. They're saying that nuclear weapons modernization should overtake reduction. Proponents of this approach argue, that's them, and planning and wargaming should be enhanced to ensure credibility and competence. And they go on to talk about the amount of war games that were held in 2015 and how those are going to be expanded in 2016. They call it the increase pace of exercising continues in 2016. So they're clearly not backing away from the war drums. And they continue to try to build pressure on Putin.
Well, they haven't won. The policy hasn't worked in Syria, has it? And so the Russians have won that round without any question. So I think they're going to continue to keep pumping out the rhetoric and the propaganda that Russia is the danger. Whereas what do we see? We see warmongering and wars created by the West, just as Kevin has said.
Okay, Monday night. Ian Crane is back. Humanity versus Insanity, the Crane Report. His guest on the Crane Report tonight was actually the guest that was supposed to be there last Thursday, but that was put off till tonight. So we'll be talking economic things, and Ian will also be joined by Max Egan, and then Fracking Nightmare at 9 o'clock as usual. Join us for those if you can. And while we're just discussing Ian Crane. Obviously, AV7 is on this weekend, and that means that there won't be a UK Column News broadcast on Friday this week or Monday next, because we'll be travelling, or I'll be travelling up and down.
Okay, and we'll just add a big thank you to Andy Peacher for the Child Protection Conference in Lanark, which was on Thursday. Some very, very interesting speakers, everybody expressing grave concern over the scale of child abuse in Britain, and of course the blatant cover-up by the British government of the abuse of children. And we'd also like to say thank you to Penzance Truth Action for their day on Saturday, talking about the state of the nation, which covered the state of the nation with Ian Crane and myself, and also started to look at looked at health matters with Patrick. So it was a very good event, and we hope there'll be more of those in Cornwall. Well, let's go on to the NHS, and perhaps you won't be expecting this as the subject because it's counter-terrorism in the NHS. This is a really excellent article here, excuse me, on international relations. A lady is pointing out that the NHS has been cynically used since 2011 to run the Prevent strategy. Why is the government so keen on the NHS? Well, it's because of the amount of contact they have with people. So if you're an NHS worker, you're one of the workers that's coming into contact with 315,000 patients daily, and there's some 700,000 workers in private and voluntary healthcare. Well, since David Cameron and Nick Clegg got into the swing of power, everybody in the NHS is watching you to see whether you or your family or your children are potential terrorists. And this article ends with this statement: a policy which ignores academic research, criminalises political belief and builds on extensive surveillance and monitoring system through health and education is itself an extremist and violent endeavour. And I thought, what an excellent article. We couldn't put it plainer than that. Many people have been talking to us about the changes in the NHS from a generally caring professional environment where people were looked after and made bettered into something which is a lot colder and more callous. We couldn't get more callous than this, a headline in the Mail, but it's saying that there's new tests coming in which would allow blood checks to be made, which has got a 99.9% success rate with diagnosing that a baby is a Down syndrome baby. And this article here is written by Dominic Lawson for the Daily Mail. He has a Down syndrome daughter. You can see a really nice picture. And this man is saying what we are seeing here is state-sponsored eugenics, and he is absolutely right. If we look at some of the content of his article, we've got the details. January, the National Screening Committee cleared a new blood test for expectant mothers, said to be almost 99% effective in detecting if an unborn child has Down syndrome. Ever since then, those behind the test have been lobbying Health Secretary Jeremy Hunt to authorise its use throughout the NHS. And he also adds, one newspaper put it exuberantly, hundreds of babies could be saved each year. Another spoke enthusiastically of the eradication of Down syndrome. What they're talking about is the murder, of course, of these children. Mike, it is just obvious what is now going on in the NHS. We know that tens of thousands of people died in Staffordshire and the other hospitals involved. We're now moving on to another. Aside from the elderly, we're moving on to more vulnerable people, Down syndrome. What does the state want to do? Eugenics, get rid of them.
Yeah.
Kevin, quick reply from your good self.
I agree with everything you said, Brian. We're in very dangerous times indeed. But if I could just come back very quickly to the Welsh Assembly elections here. I didn't realise this, and I think it's worth me saying this regarding Robert Greene, when he stood up in Aberdeen South, not the general election before, I think it was, the UKIP political party actually withdrew their candidate in support of Robert up there. Now, having spoken to Robert yesterday, he says he's in possession of an email from Nigel Farage, Brian, offering him his full support and his party's full support regarding the Holly Gregg case, which I thought was quite amazing, the way that political parties tend to operate these days. So, as I said, with 7 UKIP, a new intake in South Wales, hopefully in not too long a time, we can maybe have the full backing of UKIP and Nigel Farage in the European Parliament, as well as in the United Kingdom regarding the Linda Lewis case.
Well, thank you for that, Kevin. It will be exceptionally interesting to see what Nigel Farage does. Obviously fully committed at the moment with the EU referendum, but I think once that's over, it's going to be the time that the mettle of Nigel Farage is really tested, particularly in relation to all the basics, which is the crime, the corruption, the child abuse, all of these key factors going on in UK. Well, if you thought it couldn't get worse, we think it can. Have a look at this. We've now got mindfulness working at the heart of the government. Here's their document, Mindful Nation UK. First of all, we've had behavioural insights. Now we're bringing in mindfulness to reframe politicians. This is part of the executive summary. This is the Mindfulness All-Party Parliamentary Group. Interesting that you called up one on screen. This is how all the work's done. It's got just a very generalised introduction that it's about paying attention to what's happening in the present moment, in the mind, body and external environment, with an attitude of curiosity and kindness. It's just the picture you get of Parliament, isn't it, Mike? So this is the worrying thing. Here we've got comments from parliamentarians who've attended mindfulness classes. These people are all deeply insecure. Apparently before they had the mindfulness training, they couldn't really work. They were worried about their own thoughts. They were under pressure and stress. So the first one, it says, although initially sceptical, having completed the course and attended every session, I'm a convert. It's just logical. We could all do with simple techniques to help us remember to live and appreciate the present moment. I'll recommend it to all the young people in my constituency. Well, let's go on. I found the ethos, thinking and practice totally compelling and additionally free of psychobabble, religion and spiritual illusions. An enriching experience. We don't want any spiritual stuff in there. We're going to be psychobabbled at low level. The course has been of great benefit both to me personally and professionally. The mindfulness breathing techniques and practical exercises have helped me cope much better with the stresses and strains of a highly demanding job. These are people who just can't do the job, Mike.
Indeed.
They are seriously damaged. And they're telling us, I found the course extremely helpful in focusing my mind. So we've got politicians at the moment unable.
They can't focus their minds.
They can't focus. For anyone looking to find a way of balancing the often competing demands of home, work, and not least ourselves, it's worth their checking introduction. Too often we overlook the basics in our lives and need to find a way of connecting with what really... We've got politicians who can't connect with what really matters, and they're running the country. Are we surprised at what we're seeing around us? Let's go. Today's mad whirl, a few well-earthed, indeed profoundly common sense contemporary insights are truly invaluable. So we've got some expert drifted in from a consultancy giving our politicians common sense. So they were presumably short of it before.
I think they were.
I'm sort of smiling here. I'm not on camera at the moment, but I'm not really smiling because this explains the state of the country. Mindfulness need not be thought of as a cure for those in need. It also helps one to know how to enjoy living a life of service. I found the mindfulness course amazingly helpful. So what we've got here is mesmerised MPs who are no longer in control of themselves. They couldn't think in a rational, common sense way before. They certainly won't now. So how bad is this? Well, let's have a look at this. Where will the mindfulness teachers come from? Just pick up this sentence. Presented simplistically or with misinterpretations, the radical perspective shifting potential of the approach is lost. So this is showing quite clearly that what's going on here is that people are having their whole value system changed. By who? Who's actually doing this? Well, a variety of consultants. And what's the effect? Well, we've got a policeman here telling us the effect. He said that since he started practicing mindfulness, I've noticed that I'm calmer and more likely to feel compassion towards victims, witnesses, and even offenders. I think this has implications for evidence gathering. Well, I reckon it has. Bias, I think, is maybe what's coming. But not to worry, because he's become a better father and husband and a better leader. Now, this example's been taken from that document. Well, who's running all of this? Well, we've got two co-chairs, Tim Lawton MP, and we've also got Jessica Morden. Thanks very much for that. I just thought we'd bring in Tim Farron, because he's an MP. The headline there is incorrect. I made a mistake with Tim Farron on that. Tim Farron we're bringing in because, of course, are we seeing this man showing compassion?
Maybe he should go on one of these mindfulness courses.
Maybe he already has, Mike, is the key thing.
Yes.
So who's in that group? What are they doing? Well, it's a good question, but not to worry about the MPs, because they're being backed by big business. So the government is telling us that we should be relaxed because Google, Transport for London, Bosch, Tees Esk and Weir Valley NHS, and the Finance Innovation Lab, this is all big business, they all recommend mindfulness, therefore we need to have it. I really don't know what else to say, because if you want to say why are we living in a mad world, well, let's look at government. And of course, we published an article which was From Magic to Madness, the government's NLP assault on our minds. Well, in that article, we showed that actually what was going on was that we had trainers pumping NLP into politicians themselves. And we mentioned Mr. Peter Botting, who describes himself as a professional storytelling coach who's trained some 80 Conservative MPs. We've no idea of his values or morality, but he's using NLP on the MPs in Parliament. And let's remember this Mindspace document, which said there's much that we do not know, but we're going to continue to use applied behavioural psychology. We're not sure how the effects will work with one another. We're still going to do it. And then this was the ultimate from the British government. People will not know that their behaviour has been changed, or if they do, they will not know how it was changed. This is unbelievably dangerous, Mike, and we've seen the NHS going from a reasonable professional organisation providing care to this very aggressive and cold management structure where people are now dying. We're going to kill off a baby because the baby's Down syndrome. This is desensitisation as used by the Nazis. Was that too extreme, do you think?
No.
Kevin, we'll give you a response on this. It is, we are virtually lost for words at the speed that this stuff is coming to light now.
Absolutely flabbergasted, Brian, by what you've said. But, you know, what can you say? It's mind control, and it's getting stronger every day. But, you know, one point I'll make as well, Brian, I'd like to thank Andrew Beecher as well for hosting the conference that we were at in Lanark. And interestingly, after I'd got back home, I received an email from a supporter of Linda Lewis, and I suppose this could be looked upon as mindfulness as well, stating, and I'm going to allege this, Brian, and I'm not in any way saying that anything illegal or unlawful is being done here, but I've mentioned the chap before, David Rees, the Welsh Assembly member for Aberavon, and Stephen Kinnock, the Member of Parliament for Aberavon. We believe, and there seems to be a truth in this, that they are actually renting their constituency offices from the former deputy leader of Neath Port Talbot Council and Cabinet Minister called Mike James. So mindfulness at its best, you know, the brothers in Port Talbot are mindful of each other's well-being and bank balances.
That is...
But there seems to be a great deal of merit in this. Now, I'm not saying anything is wrong with what they're doing, but I just wonder if this had come out before the Welsh Assembly election, would people have thought, look at this, that's the brothers looking after each other and lining each other's pockets, and would that have made a bit of a difference? So more work to do. But of course, David Rees AM and Stephen Kinnock MP, if I'm incorrect in my allegation, please email me and I'll set the record right.
Okay, thank you. Well, let's end on this article that's already being picked up by a lot of people, that apparently buses are going to have Praise Allah slogans. And of course, what is now being said is that this is pro-Muslim, pro-Islam, whereas we weren't allowed to have Christian messages on the side of buses. What I find so interesting about this, Mike, is it's so clearly a ramping up of divide and rule. This is to get people at each other's throats. And who's devised this policy? Well, let's remember that it's the British government, and that is the British government that approved Satanism in the armed forces and has recently erected the monument to the satanic god Baal in Trafalgar Square. If you're not convinced by me saying that, somebody has been doing their homework and recently challenged the Ministry of Defence on the documentation behind the approval of Satanism in the Royal Navy. And they say your inquiry is being treated as a request for information under the Freedom of Information Act 2000. I can confirm that no approval of Satanism, Luciferianism as a religion has been issued by the Royal Navy. The armed forces regard personal beliefs as a private matter, and what's done in an individual's own time is also regarded as private matter, as long as it does not offend others, affect operations, etc. However, we do not recognise Satanism as a formal religion, and we will not grant facilities or make specific time available for individual worship. So you've got to do it in your own time, and we're not going to grant facilities.
That's a lie.
Well, it is absolutely a lie, so we'll bring in the red arrow, and let's just remind people of what was published. Here's the Daily Record, but it appeared in other newspapers as well. So it's talking about Chris, a leading hand on board HMS Cumberland. This is going back a few years, but he was told he was allowed to practice as a Satanism. They accepted it, and even, let's bring it in, sorry, this is the bit, they accepted it and even offered him space on board to carry out satanic rituals. So why is it that the Ministry of Defence is now suddenly confused and saying we didn't approve it? Clearly they did approve it. So is this the fact that because people are actually digging out the truth, we've now got the Ministry of Defence backpedaling as fast as they can go?
Well, who at what level would that approval have had to come from? If he was going to get space on board to practice, could the commander of that ship have given that approval without seeking approval from the MOD?
He could have, but I think that is extremely unlikely, Mike, because the captain of the ship would know that this was a very hot topic. He would know that there was a precedence issue if he did it and then it's repeated. So he would have instantly gone higher to ask what the view was. And there, in my opinion, this would have been a decision that was made at the very top of the Navy by the senior officers responsible for naval personnel. And I don't even believe they would have dared do it without consultation with the Ministry of Defence. So my professional opinion, if I'm allowed to say that as an ex-Navy officer, is that no way would this have just been made by the captain of the ship. This would have been made by the Ministry of Defence, which is why it was subsequently publicised. So I think what we can see here is the Ministry of Defence running scared now that people are asking the right question: who approved it? Where's the documentation to support it? Interesting that people in the chat room today are picking up on this progression from the fact that the government is playing around with our minds, propaganda, mindfulness, common purpose, NLP, and at the same time we're gently bringing in Satanism. I don't think we should be worried about Islam. What we should be worried about is the Satanists in the British government. Kevin, last 30 seconds from you.
Well, last 30 seconds, Brian, on what you've said there. Basically, the real enemy of the people is your own government, and that applies in every country as far as I can see in the world. The enemy of the people, quite simply, are the politicians that we put into power supposedly or allegedly to rule over us. The real terrorists in this case are sitting in Westminster.
Well, we couldn't have put that better. The real terrorists are in Westminster. I think I agree with that one, Mike.
Yeah.
Well, that brings us to the end of today's news. Thank you for joining us. If you like what we do and you haven't subscribed, please consider doing so. Or alternatively, making a small donation. We can only do what we do with your help. Thank you very much for joining us. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.